When people think about the fall of Rome, they imagine barbarian hordes storming the gates, legions collapsing, or emperors poisoned in marble palaces. But empires don't crumble just from outside attack. They rot from within, and one of the most corrosive forces is always money. Rome didn't just fall because of invasions or corruption. It fell because its currency died. And the lessons from that collapse still apply to every modern economy that thinks it can play games with money and get away with it. To understand this tragedy, we must first understand its foundation. For centuries, Rome's economic backbone was the silver denarius. First minted around 211 B.C., it was nearly pure silver, trusted across the empire and beyond. Roman soldiers were paid in it, merchants demanded it, and ordinary people stored their wealth in it. The denarius wasn't just money, it was confidence forged into metal. The empire's power and the coin's value were intrinsically linked. As long as people believed in Rome, they believed in its money. But running an empire is an immense financial burden. By the 2nd century A.D., Rome was stretched thin, defending vast borders against Germanic tribes, Parthians in the east, and unrest from within. Tax revenues cannot keep pace with escalating military costs. So, the emperors turned to an age-old trick: debasement. Instead of raising taxes always unpopular, they secretly reduced the silver content in the denarius. The numbers tell the story of this decay. Under Emperor Augustus, who ruled at the dawn of the empire, the denarius contained about 95% silver. By the reign of Caracalla in the early 3rd century, it had dropped to around 50%. By the time of Gallienus in the mid-3rd century, the denarius contained less than 5% silver. A coin once made of solid metal had become a bronze disc coated with a thin silver wash. The people can see and feel the difference. Inflation followed. Prices rose because money was no longer anchored to real value. A measure of wheat that once cost a single denarius might suddenly cost dozens. This was not an abstract theory. It destroys the lives of ordinary Romans. Soldiers demand higher pay to cover rising costs. Merchants stopped accepting debased coins, preferring barter or payments in gold. Local economies reverted to direct trade because the currency was no longer trusted. And the more confidence eroded, the more emperors struck cheaper coins, hoping volume would replace value. It was a vicious cycle, the same cycle that has repeated in countless inflations since. The crisis peaked during the so-called crisis of the 3rd century. Nearly 50 years of chaos, invasions, plagues, civil wars, and economic collapse. Emperors rose and fell with dizzying speed. Behind the political drama was a broken financial system. Farmers abandoned their lands rather than pay taxes. Trade networks fractured. In a desperate attempt, Emperor Diocletian issued the edict on maximum prices, fixing the cost of over 1,000 goods. Violators faced death. The edict was a disaster. The black market exploded, and official trade all but collapsed. People learned that quickly the law couldn't make a broken coin whole. Ultimately, the Western Empire, its economic core hollowed out, could not recover. The debasement of the denarius had destroyed trade networks, crippled the military, and most importantly, it had destroyed trust, the glue that holds a society together. The fall of Rome was not a single event, but a long unraveling, and currency collapse was one of its sharpest threads. So, what does this mean for us today? It means that the destruction of money is always the destruction of empires. The Roman currency crisis is simply the earliest full-scale blueprint for collapse. Fast forward to the 20th century, and the echoes are deafening. After World War I, Germany faced crushing war reparations under the Treaty of Versailles. The government printed marks to cover its obligations, thinking it could paper over real problems. By 1923, hyperinflation was raging. A loaf of bread cost over 200 billion marks. Pensioners starved as their life savings evaporated. And that economic despair fueled the extremism that set the stage for Hitler's rise. Zimbabwe followed the same path in the early 2000s. Facing land seizures, falling production, and rising debts, the government turned to the printing press. By 2008, inflation had reached a mind-bending level, an annual rate of 89.7 sextillion%. But you don't have to look only at the extremes. In 1971, President Richard Nixon took the US dollar off the gold standard, severing the last link between currency and a tangible anchor. From that moment, the dollar became what economists call a fiat currency, backed only by trust. And just as in Rome, the temptation to spend beyond its means grew irresistible. A dollar in 1971 could buy what takes more than $6 today. The bills look the same, but the value has been systematically hollowed out. The trick is always the same. Governments disguise inflation as growth. Just like the Roman emperors, they pretend that nothing fundamental has changed, while quietly extracting value from every coin, every bill, every paycheck. So, what are the core lessons we should take from the legacy of a dead coin? First, understand that inflation is not an accident. It is a policy. It is the silent tax that has broken empires for 2,000 years. Second, realize that real wealth is not found in paper or digits on a screen, but in assets that hold value when currency does not. Land, skills, productive businesses. Third, never assume that stability is permanent. Romans in the 1st century would have laughed if told their coins would one day be worthless. And fourth, and perhaps the most profound lesson for the United States today, the status of a global reserve currency is not a shield. It is a trap. Rome's denarius wasn't just the empire's currency. It was the currency of their known world. This gave the emperors an enormous privilege. They could export their debasement and sustain their spending for far longer than they otherwise could have. America today enjoys a similar exorbitant privilege with the dollar. The ability to print the currency the rest of the world needs for trade and reserves has allowed the U.S. government to sustain debts and deficits at a scale that would be impossible for any other nation. But Rome's story shows this privilege is a double-edged sword. It creates a dangerous complacency, a belief that this time is different. It masks the internal rot until it is too late. When the world's faith in the denarius finally collapsed, it didn't just collapse in Rome, it collapsed everywhere. The fourth lesson is this: when you are the center of the global financial system, your unraveling is not a slow decline, but a seismic event. The fall of Rome reminds us that financial systems can collapse slowly, then all at once, as trust evaporates. The barbarians at the gate may get the credit for finishing the job, but their work was already done for them. The real killer is always inside the treasury. And here is the punchline. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. The Roman currency crisis wasn't just about bad emperors. It was about the inherent fragility of money itself when abused by power. And that fragility has never gone away. If this kind of deep analysis provides you with value, and if you believe that understanding the past is the key to navigating our complex future, then hit the subscribe button. History holds the answers, and together, we will find them. Thanks for watching.